Welcome back. A brief recap. The insight is the need to balance the time and attention you give to ensuring short-term survival versus preparing the organization to come out of the crisis stronger and better equipped for the post-crisis world. For us at IMD, this first meant realizing quickly enough that this was not a bleep, this was going to become a major crisis, at which point we set up 3 sets of activities led by different members of the leadership team. One focused on ensuring the health of our key constituencies, the second focused on programs and revenues, and the third on playing defense, which meant reducing our cost base and securing lines of financing to help us to be ready for the worst. But we were also determined to come out of this crisis a stronger organization rather than a weaker one. Now, there are 2 major reasons why you could come out of a crisis a weaker organization. One reason is the impact of the sacrifices you may feel you have to make in order to survive the crisis. Reduced investments in people, in systems, in research and development, and/or in business development activities. During the 2008 to 2010 global financial crisis, most organizations and most governments made pretty severe cuts in these areas in order to survive the crisis and also to maintain their financial performance during that period. In contrast, the Singaporean government decided to draw upon some of their reserves to support companies through the crisis and to help them to keep their employees as much as possible and use the crisis to train and retrain them. As a result, Singapore came out of the crisis much faster than anyone else and with a momentum that has contributed to Singapore's remarkable success over the last 10 years. As IMD's executive committee and with the support of our board, we decided that as much and as long as humanly possible, we would pursue a Singaporean strategy. And we would continue to invest in areas where we believe investment will pay off. The second reason why you might come out of a crisis a weaker organization is if you fail to make the moves or the investments needed to succeed in the post-crisis world. Some crises bring about a major disruption but do not fundamentally change the rules of the game. Other crises do change the rules of competition, and if you don't make the decisions needed to excel in that new world, you may survive the crisis, but you won't thrive thereafter. At IMD, we believe that this COVID-19 crisis will change the rules of the game for us to some extent. We think that people will travel again when they can do so, but we do believe that they will probably travel less because this crisis is helping all of us to realize that we can actually get a lot done at a distance. This means that as IMD, we should take advantage of this crisis to accelerate our investments into A, new technologies, enabling us to support executives at a distance, and B, into developing our faculties and our staff's capability to design interventions and interactions that make the most of these technological possibilities. On one hand, we need the hardware, but we also need the software to make the most of it. So we decided that alongside playing defense, we would also play offense by using this crisis as an opportunity to prepare ourselves for the world that will follow. The tagline was, let's do over the next 3 months what we would have otherwise done over the next 3 years. This included a strong technology drive, as well as a strong focus on nurturing our employees' shared sense of purpose and community. Looking back, I think I unconsciously decided to lead this strategic thrust myself. I was very much part of the discussions on playing defense, but I think I took the lead on the playing offense. And I was very fortunate to have a few colleagues who were also very eager to contribute on this front, so we created a task force around them. In other industries, one of the ways to prepare for the post-crisis world might be to engage in merger and acquisitions activities, to take advantage of competitors' misfortunes, and or to acquire new technologies or enter new markets. Again, how your organization can play offense will differ with your context. My question to you is, are you, as a leadership team, allocating the time and the energy and freeing up potential resources to play offense and ensure that you come out of this crisis a stronger organization, well equipped to thrive in the post-crisis environment? Looking back on these last few weeks and on our efforts to balance immediate survival and longer-term competitiveness through these 4 focus areas, again, for us, health, programs, defense, and offense, I think we faced 2 challenges. One challenge was decision-making. Decision-making needs to be data-based to resist the pressure of, on one hand, conservative and defensive attitudes, which will err on the side of not changing anything, but also resist the pressure of hasty decisions triggered by fear and anxiety, which will err on the side of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Of course, data-based decision-making can also become slow decision-making, as there is always more data that can be collected or waited for in the hope of reducing uncertainty. But sometimes in a crisis, you cannot allow yourself to be paralyzed while you hope and wait for conclusive evidence. Oftentimes, there will not be conclusive evidence quickly enough. And you're going to have to decide based on convincing enough evidence, or maybe even earlier based on weak signals. In addition, in a crisis, you may have to be ready to change your mind quickly as new data comes to your attention. In our case, we started a board meeting on a Thursday, and I explained very convincingly to our board that yes, we would suspend face-to-face programs under a set of identified conditions, but these conditions were not yet in place. The board meeting resumed at 8 a.m. the next day, at which point I equally convincingly explained that based on developments from the previous evening and during the night, enough of these conditions were now being met and we would be suspending face-to-face programs until further notice. Changing my mind overnight is pretty unusual for me. Normally, like you, I guess I make decisions based on a good analysis of relevant data, and then I don't change my mind, unless, of course, new relevant data requires me to do so. In a crisis, new relevant data can come up very quickly, and you must be willing and able to change your mind if and as needed. A second challenge associated with decision-making is the need to maintain a clear sense of priorities to ensure that you gain enough traction quickly enough on these priorities. Maintaining this clear sense of priorities requires you to guard against 2 very different types of pressures. A first pressure will arise from the feeling of uncertainty and fear. There is so much out there that we don't know, so many risks that we haven't fully understood, so many things that can go wrong that discussions can become paralyzing as people get overwhelmed by uncertainties and by elements that they don't control, instead of focusing on the ones that they can actively influence. So you must be very mindful of instances of helplessness and hopelessness around you. Both of these emotions, helplessness and hopelessness, are A, very detrimental to good decision-making, and B, also very bad for your physical and emotional health. So you need to help your team and your colleagues to avoid paralysis and to stay focused on the precious few strategic thrusts that you identified. At the other extreme, you may have colleagues coming up with lots of new ideas and possibilities that they want to pursue. This, too, is a dangerous avenue. This crisis may be a great time for selected and ring-fenced experiments, but it also requires focus and consistency. More than 20 years ago at the 1997 Apple Worldwide Developers Conference, Steve Jobs reminded us that people think focus means saying yes to the things you've got to focus on. But that's not what it means at all, he said. Focus means saying no to the 100 other good ideas. So you have to pick carefully. And he concluded, innovation is saying no to 1,000 things. So we did pick carefully, and we said no to a few ideas. In the process, we probably annoyed a few colleagues who had energy and passion for these ideas, but we felt it was important to be deliberate about the use of our time and energy, and about where we were willing to experiment and where not, or at least not yet. It has been very interesting over the last few weeks to work this balancing act between short-term survival and longer-term preparation. I don't think the balance between these two poles was the same every day or every week. And I'm pretty sure we will continue to have to be mindful and deliberate in our time and resource allocation. We know that depending on the way the world succeeds or not, to come out of confinement in an orderly and healthy way, we will have to adapt. In a nightmare scenario, we may have to cut much deeper than we would like in some areas. We will do so if and as needed. But in the meantime, our decision to keep playing offense has been a powerful, energizing force for the leadership team and for all of our employees. I hope these ideas will stimulate your own reflection. Let us know what you think in the chat or on social media so we can all continue to learn from one another's experiences. And I hope to see you soon for the last of my 4 insights on leading through a crisis.